All right, so our next step is to top off the second half of the flask. Not completely, but you'll see in a second how much. If you notice, the stone now has gone through its initial stage, so it's pretty set, with the exception of this one. This one's still soft because it was the second one that I did earlier. But by the time I mix this, introduce some water, mix it on the vibrator and come here, I think it'll be just fine. I've also have these paper towel here that I've cut the size that fits inside the flask. And you'll see in a second where I use that. So you can do that ahead of time. I'll set that aside and mix my 50-50 plaster stone mix. In this one, you can mix it a little bit thinner than you did for the lower half of the flask. If you happen to have a little bit too much water like that, just drain it out and just use enough that's on the surface. So that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit more. And then a little bit more, you can just pick it up with your spatula, introduce some water in there instead of going over and adding too much. So that looks pretty thin, that looks good. So we're gonna come over to the vibrator. You can see this one is a lot thinner. So upon final spatulation, it's a little more runny. Okay, so what we're gonna do next, we're gonna take our flask, and I usually like to put a little paper towel here because we're gonna tap the flasks on the bench. We're gonna add some stone here. And we're gonna hold the flasks very firmly and gently tap it on the bench until we cover most of the model, and rotate it. So once you covered all the teeth and you're clamping it very securely so no stone seeps in between, we can apply this little piece of paper, and that will act as a stress breaker, so when we're deflasking our case later on, it'll make it a little bit easier to knock things apart. So a little bit of blob of stone there, and once again, over some paper, hold these together very firmly and gently tap. I need to add a little bit more. Hold it together until we cover all the teeth. And you can see there's no stone that has seeped through between the two half of the flasks. So I'm going to place it there very carefully, and then again apply the pre-cut paper towel in between. So the reason why I don't go all the way to the top, because if I did and placed my lid on here now, it will force all that stone in there to go in between the two half of the flask. We don't want that. We want metal to metal contact to offset the amount of pressure we're going to apply with a hydraulic press later on when we pack the acrylic, as to prevent any possible fracture of the models as well as the investment. So we're gonna let that set for another 6 to 8 minutes, and then we're gonna mix another layer and top off our investment.